Hi, my name is Caitlin Yammer, and this is my lifespan presentation for Kinney 372. So I grew up in Frankenmuth, Michigan for most of my life. I moved there when I was about 3. Most of you have probably heard of Frankenmuth. It's the Christmas town, or the town with the kind of mid chicken that everyone seems to really like. But I moved to Saginaw when I started going to SVSU. I lived in the dorms for a year, and then now I live in a house off campus with some of my friends, which has been really fun. In my free time, when I'm not doing anything for my exercise science degree that I'm currently pursuing at SVSU, I like to spend time with my awesome family, which is pictured right there. I have 2 sisters. There's my parents, and then my sister's husband on the right there. I am the middle child, so the sister that is right next to me, and I'm right next to my mom, is younger than me, and then my sister, who is on the other side of my dad, between my dad and her husband, is older than me. And then while I'm at school and I'm not with my family and in my free time, I like to spend time with my roommates that are all pictured in that top picture. And then besides that, I love to do things with His House Christian Fellowship, which is a group I'm heavily involved with on campus. The bottom picture on the right is a picture of the group I went on a spring break mission trip with this year, where we looked to love people and share the gospel when possible. But that was us on our last morning watching the sun rise all together. During my infancy, when talking to my parents, they said it's hard when you have 3 kids to keep track of who did what when. And so they had just a couple comments on each of these, but I picked the ones they had the most comments on. So the first one for the infancy reflexes is going to be the search or rooting reflex, which is when the baby will move their head towards the stimulus to look for basically something to eat out of, whether that be a bottle or breastfeeding. So this usually disappears at around 4 months, but my mom said she definitely remembers this being something she noticed that all 3 of her kids did, which is a good thing. The second one I want to focus in on is the Babinski reflex. My dad said he really remembered this one with my younger sister because it creates the weird toe extension. It usually disappears around 6 months, and he said that sounded about right for all of us, but that he just thought it was a funny thing that babies did. The last one I'm going to talk about is the stepping reflex, and my parents both said that they remember this, at least with my older sister, if not with me and my younger sister as well. But this is when you hold the baby upright and they'll lift their feet off of the surface, kind of looking like they're stepping, which is why it's called the stepping reflex. And this disappears usually around 2 months old. For the infancy voluntary movements, my parents had a lot less to say about this, but I just chose the ones that they mentioned a little bit. For lifting your head, usually occurs around 1 month old. For sitting up, it usually occurs around 6 months old. And then for walking, it usually occurs around 12 months old. And for all of these, they said that I was around those same times, if not like a month or 2 out from there on either side. So I was a pretty normal baby. They didn't have a lot of issues or concerns with me growing up with different voluntary movements like these ones. For childhood foundational skills, my parents said that with kicking that I progressed pretty quickly, more so than my older sister did. So they ended up putting me in soccer, which will be on the next slide. But for running, I was kind of a gangly individual and I never really had control over my arms very well. So I ran and I did it around the same time as other people my age would have. So there was no worrying there. But my dad said I just kind of looked like I didn't understand what I was supposed to do with my arms while I was running. So that was just an interesting thing to put in there. Doesn't really affect the development, but an interesting anecdote. But then it kind of connects to the throwing aspect of my development, which seemed to progress slower than other kids my age. So it could have just been that I didn't know how to properly control my arms, but it seems that I had control over my legs pretty well. For childhood specialized skills, like I said, was really good at hand-eye coordination from a young, or not hand-eye coordination, but foot-eye coordination from a young age. And so my parents put me in soccer, as pictured right here. I'm pretty young, playing soccer, but then over here is me playing soccer in high school. So I did do that all growing up until college. And so the progression that I wanted to talk about is learning to dribble. My dad was my soccer coach, so he was always very adamant about using both feet while you're dribbling. So the way he would do that is start with us kicking a stationary ball and then moving to just kicking the ball with one foot while you're walking, but making sure to keep it pretty close. And then moving to 2 feet while walking, kicking back and forth between feet instead of going right to running, so that when you do run, you can utilize both feet. A lot of kids aren't taught to use both feet while they're dribbling, and then that's something they have to learn later in life. But I would definitely say that this is more of a serial practice. It's got those different building blocks. Being able to dribble takes the isolated practice of each part. And then into my adulthood, I just have some pictures of me with some friends that I've met while in college. Some of them were on my introduction slide and some of them weren't. But I'm just going to talk about some milestones to hopefully achieve later on in life. I've got a timeline set up here. In my 20s, I'd like to graduate from my undergrad and graduate programs if I do plan on pursuing that. Right now, I'm thinking about a degree in physical therapy, but you never know what could change between now and 2 years when I graduate from my undergrad. I'd also like to get married and start a family in my 20s. And then in my 30s, mainly being a mom, if that's what God has for me. I think that being able to nurture your kids is a super important part of being in a family, and I want to be able to do that. So during that time, still pursuing different degrees or career opportunities as able, but focusing on being a mom. And then in my 40s, as my kids grow up and become a little bit more independent, continue in either that physical therapy occupation or in whatever occupation I decide on doing, while still supporting my children to the best of my ability. And then in my 50s, continuing to grow through education and continual learning, because even if I'm not in college anymore, I love to learn. And if I'm in physical therapy or a different healthcare setting, I would love to get more certifications and be able to help more people through my scope of practice. And then in my 60s and 70s, they kind of clump together, but retiring in there somewhere, caring for my parents and grandkids, and then picking up new hobbies and caring for any and all family that needs anything. And then my lifespan calculator said that I would be living till about 90 years old, so I just stopped it there. In my 80s, I just lived life as well as I could with the decreasing mobility that occurs during that time, which we learned about in this class. I wanted to talk briefly about my lifespan calculator. It said that I would live till about 90 years old, and I wanted to share, because my VO2 max was pretty normal. It just decreased quite a bit when I added the extra age to that, which is pretty normal, but definitely surprising if you haven't thought about how much your VO2 max decreases with age, since it's not something that you can really carry with you into old age. But I wanted to focus more on something that would be a little more unique to me. A lot of my family deals with cardiovascular disease, and so that's something that would definitely play into my VO2 max as I get older, with that ability to continue aerobic exercise. And then once again, the lifespan calculator talks a lot about drugs and alcohol and all of those things that can affect how long you live. And so it would be smart to just not do any of those things so that I can live until I'm 90, like it said I could. In conclusion, my infancy had pretty normal values, and I was a pretty happy and healthy baby. At least that's what my parents said. And then in my childhood, I had different skills that progressed faster than others, such as kicking versus throwing, but then those were utilized through soccer and other sports like basketball, cross country, track, softball. Any sport I could get my hands on, I did, but I was just better at soccer because of that foot-eye coordination that I had. And then I had all those milestones in my adulthood, focused a lot on family, and then hopefully living until I'm 90 years old. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed it.